anyone who's grown up with body shaming, fat shaming, slut shaming, you know, हमारे culture में 4-5 साल की बच्ची को हम slut shame करते हैं,
सेक्सुअलाइज कर
हम उसको body shame करते हैं, उसको fat shame करते हैं, हम लड़कों को करते हैं. And they're also raised with the instruction कि खबरदार तुमने बड़े को जवाब दिया.
We are in conversation with journalist, mother, and stand-up comedian Sahar Habib, also known as 2030 Mama on Instagram.
I covered floods in 2009, 2010, and then SWAT operation. So journalistically, Pakistan was like on steroids. You start to feel like, you know, बहुत ज़्यादा breaking news हो रही है, बहुत ज़्यादा, like, you know, you start feeling it, okay, what's the big picture here? How are we helping society? How are we helping people make better informed decisions? Because that's the point of journalism, right?
हम बात कर रहे हैं about setting boundaries, generational trauma, and what kind of journalism Pakistan needs right now. Welcome to another episode of Out of the Box. Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Out of the Box. Today I am joined once again with my co-host Sarosh. Sarosh, hello bolo.
Hi.
So today we have Sahar Habib with us. She is a journalist who has been working as a journalist for the past 18 years. Vice World News ki she's the South Asian editor. Iske alawa she also has a pretty interesting following on social media. Her handle is 2030 Mama, and the reason for that is very interesting too, because the themes that you talk about is about motherhood, about, you know, raising empowered women, about just like hope, and just generally she was part of the team that helped launch Dawn TV. She also has the kind of things that she covers is like war, elections, earthquake, floods. हम उनसे इस बारे में बहुत बातें करेंगे. जो आज की हमारी conversation होगी, it would be a little bit about just generally her work, being a journalist, उसकी क्या challenges हैं, the stories that you cover, particularly जो आप climate पे और water, flood affected areas पे cover कर रही हैं. But we would also love to talk to you about the kind of content you put out on your Instagram page. What me and Sarosh really like about it is that there's a lot of hope there, and you talk about things like generational trauma, mental health. So thank you so much for being on our show.
Thank you for having me.
So हमारा plan था कि we do this quick sa rapid fire just to kind of get people, like very original idea, you know, सबसे पहले हमने सोचा था. So we kind of are going to quickly ask you some questions, and if you don't want to answer something, you can just skip it. Okay, so I'm going to ask the first one and you ask the second one. ठीक है? Okay, so one word to describe yourself.
Layered.
Ooh. Okay, so one person.
Oh no, one idea.
Yeah, one idea that makes you cringe.
Capitalism.
One word for the people of Pakistan.
I'm going to say a cringe word. Resilient.
What inspires you the most?
Well, I think in this context, my daughter.
Yes. I knew the answer.
I knew. Yeah, मुझे
I
पता
knew.
था. One thing you love about Pakistani culture.
Hospitality.
And one thing you don't like about the Pakistani culture?
अपने काम से काम ना रखना.
Boundaries.
Yeah. आपको सबसे ज़्यादा क्या चीज़ परेशान करती है? What worries you the most?
Smog.
और हमारी एक वीडियोस पे आ रही है guys.
Free promo.
है ना? Yeah.
So if you could give a title to your biography, what would it be?
TBD.
One advice for everyone.
Eat 8 to 10 vegetables a day or fruit.
One thing you like about yourself.
I get things done, and I have a complicated relationship with that fact, but I do get things done. Like I always usually
I
get
think
things
that's a
done.
good
Yeah.
skill for a journalist to have.
Yes, yes. So something you don't like about yourself?
I don't prioritize myself as much as I prioritize my responsibilities.
If you could be any person in the world right now, who would it be and why?
I want to be myself. I'm on that journey, so I stick with that.
That's a good answer. Yeah.
वैसे ये सवाल मुझे थोड़ा end पे करना था, but Pakistan in the next 5 years.
Economic crisis.
We can talk about that. I have a lot to
We'll
ask
eventually
you.
kind
Yeah.
of इसमें हम थोड़ा expose
Yes.
कर लेंगे. An initiative that we should all support.
Mama Baby Fund.
Yes,
Mama Baby
Fund. Yeah.
Nice, nice. Well, that was our
Rapid fire.
rapid fire.
Yeah, we can just
round.
get into talking.
So yeah, सबसे पहले let's just talk a little bit about 2030 Mama. What kind of made you want to kind of start creating content online, and how has it been so far? Like, are you enjoying it, or do you, and especially when you're talking about, you know, your daughter, like, I mean, even when I was reading your description, there's something that I'm very open about, something that I'm very secretive about, so like, or private about, not secretive. So how has that journey been to kind of put yourself online?
It's been super interesting for me, you know, so because I started as very much as a mainstream media journalist in very traditional mediums, radio, TV, print, and I transitioned. I started looking at online in 2000 and what year was it? 2007, when the emergency happened in Pakistan. So I was working in TV and broadcast was pulled. So protesters were organizing on Twitter. And then we literally had to go to Twitter as a news resource. So that was my first exposure. And I remember, like, I made a Twitter account then, but it was kind of like just for news gathering. It wasn't as me as an entity on social media. I didn't really do that till 2010, when I kind of stepped away from mainstream media and I like took a bigger look at, okay, where's the media industry going? It's clearly going towards online. You were kind of getting the feel of it. I don't know, you know, 2010, just to kind of give some context, social media hadn't really become the beast it is now. It was very much still the internet उस ज़माने में, but you could tell कि कुछ होने वाला है, कुछ changes आने लगी हैं, especially because in traditional media there's this separation between audiences and the people who are creating the media, and you'll see this in Pakistan because there's also this like big generation gap, so like a lot of older people, I would say, who are like you know, went through Zia censorship, for example. They tend to like be like, oh, we should be gatekeeping on news, we should be gatekeeping on news. But, you know, I slightly think differently about this. What I was noticing was that you're seeing a lot more engagement from audiences without the gatekeeping. And then for me, I think behavior change comes when you engage with audiences, when things are not on the top imposed, but you actually critically think about it. So I felt like social media is giving that ability to critically think and make informed choices. So then I started blogging first. I had this blog called Outside Islamabad, and then I got pretty active on Twitter. But then when I had my daughter a couple of years later, one day I was nursing her and I was still on my mat leave. It was just 2 months off, and you know, I'd moved to a newsroom that was primarily digital. At this point, it was called Global Voices. I was nursing her, and then this kid, like, you know, I said something that was, you know, on the spectrum of political context, pretty progressive for Pakistan. It was like 1971 war ki anniversary thi, Bangladesh ki independence, around that or something. And I said, you know, Pakistan should apologize or pay reparations, you know, that badi wali cheez. And this kid from Bangladesh said something really awful to me on Twitter, and I was nursing my daughter at that point, and bada aapko ek physical reaction milta hai na. So I looked at his profile, I was like, ye to bacha hai, isne kaha hai, you know, jis tarah हमारे साथ हमारी औरतों के साथ ज़्यादती हुई थी. I'm just gonna like tone it down. आप जैसे लोगों के साथ होनी चाहिए. I was like, what? So I was like, and ये वो ज़माना था ना कि जब इस तरह की you weren't used to the scale of trolling. So I like literally I looked him up on Twitter. Then I was like, I looked him up on Facebook, and you always get more information on Facebook. So I found out like what city he's from, what school he went to, and everything. And then like literally tracked, right? And then I messaged him and I said, I'm going to call your mom and she's going to be so disappointed in you. And then he like, you know, and I added him, and then he DM'd me. He says, aap meri ammi ko janti hain type thing. Oh my God. And I'm so sorry, you know. And then I was like, oh. But then also like I deleted Twitter because I was like, you know, on my maternity leave, I don't need this whatever. And slowly I started noticing aista कि you can have these amazing conversations with people, but the job ko ek attack aata hai na, wo it's very unhealthy. So slowly I started noticing that I was disengaging from the heated debates of social media, and I was like, I want to have constructive conversations where people, you know, think more critically and think more towards bridge building. And I do feel like the challenges we're facing in the future are horrific. You know, you mentioned hope before, and I think we're living in a very interesting time because it's completely dystopian. When you think of the climate crisis, when you think of how irresponsible our political forces have been, or the keepers of this country have been in terms of political maturation in our decision making and our policy making. Like, we're in the worst spot possible: overpopulated country, climate sensitive, And our politics is just not mature to make the right decision. We can see these trajectories, like anyone who was looking 25, 30 years ahead with our geography. We share all the borders with all these like complicated countries, एक side पे India, एक side पे China, एक side पे Afghanistan, एक side पे Iran. We get it, right? Geopolitically, it's a complicated country. So I think people should have been planning very differently, knowing the climate crisis and the overpopulation problems as well, which makes the climate crisis even more lethal. So it is pretty dystopian. But at the same time, I think it's also very freeing, right? Because Desi culture mein legacy and passing on traditions का बहुत system है, right? So it है कि हम अपनी ज़िंदगी नहीं जी रहे, हमारे बच्चे ज़िंदगी जिएंगे, हम आगे के generations
हमारे ख्वाब पूरे करेंगे.
आगे के generations नहीं है भाई, अभी वाली ज़िंदगी जियो, right? So I felt like those kind of conversations we need to have, like in the moment now, we need to make better decisions for the next 40, 50 years. We have to stop thinking about के आगे के generations का क्या होगा. And honestly, like आगे की generations का कुछ नहीं होने वाला अब, like I don't even know, But can we make better decisions right now? And can we, and I think it's also pretty empowering when you start thinking about like, I don't have to live my life for my parents. I don't have to live my life for the future generations. I just have to live my life really responsibly for the next 40, 50 years and see what I can do. It's empowering. It gives you a sense of agency, and it also gives you a sense of hope, because we see this with so many of our elders and our families. There's always these elders who are like 30 or 40 pe kehte hain ko zindagi guzar gayi, because they didn't make, or they didn't get the education at 18 or 20, or they didn't get married at the right time, and they're like, what? And you're like, what? No, aapki zindagi, according to the current lifespan, at least it's going to be 80. At 30, 40, you're barely at midlife. So why are you just giving up on half of your life right now? So थोड़े से हम wander off हो गए. I blame the smog, which has made my brain foggy.
Yeah, no, we completely
I'm glad you
understand.
talked about trolling online and everything. It's like you have so much to deal with, मतलब personal level पे भी, you work and you have a daughter, and then you are very much active and you're communicating with your audience, with the people online, and I don't understand how you set those boundaries that you have frequently talked about, because I still don't know how to do that. I feel like I'm still very much controlled by the people who follow me. But you have this thing कि आपके platform पे you can openly decide, okay, I can post this, I can talk about this, and this person does not have the power over me to decide what I want to share, because I know you have this critical overview over whatever topic you want to discuss, so you put it out there. I still can't do that. It's like I'm too afraid to, for example, I'm too afraid to post that I'm eating this or that out of fear कि someone's going to fat shame me because I'm eating. You get me? So it's like मेरा ये सवाल है कि how do you do it? Putting it very simply.
I've worked on it, honestly. Like I think I was raised कि मेरी opinions are not as important as other people's opinions, right? So like that was the ecosystem that I was raised in. But I also like left this ecosystem at 18. I went to college in America, and if you ask me, like it took so long for me to start making independent decision making, even though I was making independent decision making. Like literally at 18, I was deciding what I was eating, who I was socializing with, what I was wearing. I had no one, I'd come back Pakistan, but honestly my parents are pretty cool like that. They're like, you're an adult, we've raised you to make good decisions, haan achhe decisions kar rahi hai type thing. But now I think back at it, I said I didn't really actually start making strong independent decisions till my daughter was born, because I was like, crap, I have to protect her from all this madness. And one of the first decisions I made for her that was like, going against the grain was, जिस तरह बच्चा पैदा होता है ना, कहते हैं बाल शेव कर दो, and there's like all this like weight with it. It's like शेव कर दो वरना क्या कहते हैं, people bring religion into it as well, people bring superstition into it and everything and blah blah blah. Now she was born with a beautiful head of hair.
Yeah.
But she also had like a bit of like skin issue. Like she had something which a lot of babies have. It's called cap. It's just like a bit of a rash on your head, you can say. So her pediatrician said, you know, I know South Asians like to shave their head, but don't shave her head because she has that. Her head's kind of sensitive. And he's like, you know, as it is like a razor close to the closest part of the body, not a good idea. Yeah, said it, and I said fine. And then everyone was like, kya matlab? And you know, and after a couple of months she got really sick, and then they were like, इसीलिए बीमार हुई क्योंकि तुमने वो किया, you know, like everything. And then her hair started. Sorry?
करवाना
नहीं, no.
Okay.
आपने नहीं कराया तो इसलिए
मैं नहीं
हो रहा है.
कराऊंगी, you know. I was sticking with this decision. Then it was also like, you know, I got really sick after she was born, and then I really wanted to nurse her, and everyone was like, "Nee, formula, and like, you know, my mom's generation, like my mom didn't nurse us. It was like formula, and I was like, no, I've read all the science on it. I've read everything.
Yeah, and it's your choice at the end of the day.
And it's really hard. Like I really struggled with nursing, really struggled with it. It was so painful, and it was not happening, and and it was so difficult. But I nursed her for 18 months exclusively for almost 6 months, and it was something I stuck with. But I didn't have the support system for it. Everyone was like, "Oh, you're being stubborn because तुम्हारी सुई अटक गई है." But no, I was actually making an informed decision. And the doctor was supporting me, you know, and you know, she wasn't putting on weight and everything, and we went through that process together. So I made these really strong decisions for her. Uske baal bhi gir gaya. So the thing with babies is when they're born, their baby hair falls off. So when we shave the hair, we're actually shaving hair that's going to fall off anyway. So uske baal bhi gir ke sabne kaha, dekho, tumne iski shave nahi ki, uske baal nahi. The thing is, the first time her hair was cut was when she was 3. She had gorgeous long curly hair. She has the same hair as me, but our hairdresser is the same. Our hairdresser this time told me, she said, you know, Sahar, she has 4 times the hair that you have. And I said, isko kabhi razor nahi laga. Iske phir bhi itne ghare baal hai. So, you know, those kinds of decisions, I feel like in my early 30s, even though technically I could make my own decisions at 18, is what happened. So I had that 12 years of unlearning that I was going on. And you know, like मैं एक simple boundary की बात करती हूँ. Now, in general, I think the way that I built 2030 Mama is that I have an insane amount of kind messages coming towards me. Like, oh my God. Like, जब शुरू में I started getting them, I was like, oh wow, this is really special, because the reason why I made this account was because I was like, social media has gotten really toxic. I want a positive experience from it. And so I started making this folder on my phone called Kind Messages. But then I was like, this is ridiculous. There's so many of them coming. It's pretty clear that I've curated a very kind community. Sometimes I do get messages that are like intrusive or judgmental. And I have this such a clear vision. Like if I'm having a bad day, it's different. But mostly when I read it, I'm like, oh, this is about them. It's not about me. And I think that's the journey that took me 12 years. कि जब लोग आपको, when they cross your boundary, it's rarely because of something that's going on with you. It's something that's going on with them. Insecurities project कर रहे हैं. They're living, you know, they're going through the messy existence of life without realizing कि वो collateral damage है. You know, they're just like, let me throw my shit everywhere because like I heard shit from someone, so मैं दूसरे बंदे पे डाल दूँ. And anyone who's grown up with body shaming, fat shaming, slut shaming, you know, हमारे culture में 4-5 साल की बच्ची को हम slut shame करते हैं,
sexualize करते हैं,
हम उसको body shame करते हैं, उसको fat shame करते हैं, हम लड़कों को करते हैं, ठीक है ना? And so a kid who grew up with something that was not meant for them. You're not supposed to subject a child to that kind of language and imagery and that kind of shame and burden. A child doesn't have the tools to handle that stuff. So if a child grows up with all this stuff and they're also raised with the instruction कि खबरदार तुमने बड़े को जवाब दिया, खबरदार तुमने, अब गलत उनके साथ हो रहा है, उनकी आपका जो nervous system है, when guilt and shame is put on you, you literally build neural pathways that are like reinforcing you to shrink, to become a smaller person. And so like, instead of letting our kids grow into like the beautiful trees that they're supposed to grow into, we're like crippling them, right? हम उनको अपनी तरह की bonsai बनाने की कोशिश कर रहे होते हैं, छोटे से छोटे, the way that we want them, and that's really unnerving. So unless the child, when they grow up and they become aware that wait, I had a lot of this put on me that wasn't mine to carry, and I need to like do something with that, then they're always going to be on the defensive. They're always going to be insecure. And that's the tricky part I find about social media, because, there's this anonymity. So what I also try to do on my account is I try to remind people that you're a real person, I'm a real person. So behave yourself.
Bilkul. And since you have mentioned, the challenges when you're raising a daughter, and even so, when the way I was raised, कि मेरे जो वाले साहब हैं, he's an activist, both of my parents are progressive, so I was given this very genderless environment when I was a kid, and carried it with me until I started going to school. और फिर वो एकदम assault हुआ है मुझे कि क्या, and there was so much confusion, there was so much aggression. I was a very aggressive kid, and people didn't get it कि boys aggressive होते हैं, ये बच्ची की aggressive हो रही है, because कभी किसी ने घर में बोला नहीं कि गुस्सा बुरी बात है उस तरह से. So how are you like navigating raising a child in the political climate that we are actually in? Like, how is that? And also kind of being very, because you are so intentional with it ना, कि recognizing कि मेरे साथ ये हुआ था, ये मेरी इस तरह तो ज़रूरी नहीं है कि ये आगे भी मैं करूँ. So you kind of are questioning everything that was done, and everyone is telling you now that's how you're supposed to do it. So how has that kind of been, and has it gotten easier with time, or are there more bigger looming challenges ahead now as they grow up?
It gets easier. I think when you initially set boundaries, that's the hardest time. And I think when she was younger, जो मैंने बड़े वाले boundaries set किए थे ना, around the hair and the nursing, and then she also had some allergies in the beginning, like she couldn't have regular milk, and abhi bhi she can't really have like gluten. So हमारे culture में ना तो allergies को लोग accept ही नहीं करते. नहीं, I mean, a mother overprotective हो रही है. So like the thing is, I'm not an overprotective mom. You can see her go to the park with me, I will let her get ganda, no? So like you can say, oh, she's being overprotective, but then when you see me outside, I'm not running after her when she falls, and I'm not like screaming and stuff. So then cognitive dissonance ek hoti hai. But there was definitely this phase where, someone said that, and then someone did give her a gluten cookie, and then she broke out in a rash. And so that set the boundary, and then that person had to be with that guilt and said, whatever, So I think ye wali jo cheez hai na, matlab sometimes you just have to let things kind of play out. But overall, alhamdulillah, like sometimes I look at my family, I'm like, whoa. Ek to she's the only grandkid on my side, my side of the family. And I think what has ended up happening is that like my parents are so like good about not using any of the language that, we think is super toxic now. Like they get it, and nahi karte. So actually, sometimes I'm like, wow, I look at my kid, I'm like, you're 10 and you haven't been through any of the traumas that I went through as a kid. And my parents were pretty engaged parents. I actually, I always say like my parents were pretty solid. It's just that desi culture में there's already so much that they carry.
And desi culture में सिर्फ आपके parents तो नहीं होते ना, पुप्पी होती है, खाला होती है, चाची होती है, आंटियाँ होती हैं, like so much. I had some very severe body image issues, and when I traced it back in therapy, तो it wasn't like मेरी माँ ने मुझे कभी कुछ कहा था, खानदान के और लोग थे जो मैं भी बोलूँगी नहीं, लेकिन yeah, so it's not just about the mother and the father. एक culture, एक जिस घर में आप पैदा हो रहे हो, especially if you're living in a joint family, that has so much like to do with it. Yeah. So now let's come to your career, which you've been a journalist for the past 18 years. That's like a very good amount of time. I'm sure आपने बहुत like changes भी देखे हैं. So initially, if you can just tell me, how did you get into it? What made you want to be a journalist? Barriers to entry थे उस time पे या नहीं? उस वक्त क्या scene था when you were like, entering the industry, and now that you've been there for a while, how has things like changed and progressed in your opinion?
Oh my God, that's like such a multi-layered question. Okay, so how did I land upon it? So I've lived half my life in Pakistan and half in the US. I've been playing musical chairs between both countries. I was born in the US. I don't call myself Pakistani American because I don't really necessarily identify with that kind of like a second generation who grew up there, because formative years mere Islamabad mein guzre, theek hai na? But I did go back and forth. So when I went to college, I actually went for architecture. And I'm really into like spaces and how they make you feel, and so and I'm creative, so I thought architecture was the thing for me, and I started that. But then what happened was that 9/11 happened, and it was such a upar se politics was imposed on someone who looks like me, who's Muslim, and I was going to college on a campus. It's Ann Arbor, Michigan, has one of the highest Arab American populations on campus, and I tend to look Arab. So for the first time in my life, when I was growing up in America, I never experienced racism. Like till I was 9, I was in New York. It's a very heavily immigrant type thing, and I can like pass for many different cultures. So I didn't really feel it. But then suddenly, I started for the first time in my life feeling like, oh my goodness. And then I actually had a racist comment here, racist comment there, and I was like, I don't understand what is going on. So I wanted to understand it. So I stepped away from architecture, and I was like, I'm just gonna play a bit and take some political science and try to understand. My father was not happy with my architecture decision at all. He did not want me to do it, and he definitely was not happy with me going towards political science. In fact, I didn't even think it was open for conversation. So मैंने उनको कहा मैं economics और math कर रही हूँ, because those were he was okay with. He actually just wanted me to go to business school, and so I started taking political science classes till the point where I was graduating. I had enough to graduate with a major, but I hadn't declared it. You know, so एक होता है ना कि आपको parents and stuff, like my father is such a different man now, and people like love him on my social media, but I really struggled with this. Like, he wanted me to be financially independent, and in his mind he thought capitalist world, business, financial independence आती है वगैरह वगैरह, and I think उसका repercussions मुझ पे हुए कि like I also I think build boundaries in weird ways because it was imposed on me from the outside. But anyway, मैं ढीठों की तरह मैंने किया जो मैंने almost करना था. Like I did political science, but if I was completely free, what I really liked when I was in college was anthropology, which I think links really well to journalism because it's like you're literally studying human beings and societies, and like it's a deeper study, and that's what we do in journalism, except we're more contemporary and it's more like nuggets of it. So अगर मेरी complete independence होती तो मैं I would have majored in film and anthropology and maybe done a minor in political science. But anyway, so what I graduated was with political science and economics, and then I was really confused कि मैं क्या करूँ. And I was like, okay, let me go to DC. There are think tanks there. That's kind of like what you do with a political science major. My advisors in college had other information for me. उन्होंने कहा कि तुम State Department apply. None of those things were clicking with me. Anyway, so I went to DC and I ended up in a think tank that I thought was pretty centrist in terms of political views, not to right, not to left. I applied for all these left ones, and then I went to the center, right? Internship.
That must have been very interesting experience. कि वो center में क्या situation?
I literally applied from center to the extreme progressive ones, and this is 2004, right? Now, if I apply to the progressive ones, ऐसे मुझे उठा लेते because I'm brown and Muslim, whatever. उस ज़माने में नहीं. उस ज़माने में scene बहुत फ़र्क था. Barriers to entry America में बहुत high थे. So anyway, this center one picked me up, and I was like, okay. So I went there for a job, and my director was really nice. His roommate was from Saudi Arabia, and he was married to a Chilean, and he was a little more progressive. But उधर इतनी ज़्यादा sexism / racism थी कि my first day on the job, this vice president came up to me and he asked me out for coffee, and he was like 20-30 years older than me. मुझे थोड़ा सा awkward लगा. मैं intern हूँ, बैठी भी हूँ अपने little cubicle में, and this guy comes and he asks for my boss, and everybody knew on the calendar he was out of the office at that time, and I was literally the only one. पूरा जो उनकी team थी, they'd gone for something, and I was just sitting there alone. And he came over and he's like asked me out for coffee, and I was like, and he's like, you know, what are your plans, this, that, and आपको पता चल जाता है ना कि कोई आपको mentor कर रहा है कि कुछ और. तो anyway, खैर मेरी गलत लगा. तो मैंने कहा मैं क्या करूँ first day on the job, should I tell my boss, should I not? And बड़ा awkward आपकी feeling होती है. I was only 22, and then my boss the next day, he calls me into his office. He's like फलाना बंदा, did he pop it and say something? I said, why? He said, he made a comment to me, so I think he might have popped in and said something to you. I said, yeah, he asked me out for coffee, but like I'm not, I don't think, I was like, I want to be mentored by you. इस तरह करके कहा. So he's like, I don't know, my roommate was from Saudi, and I know that, conservative societies कैसे होते हैं. So शायद तुम्हें पता ना हो, but यहाँ पे बड़े कमीने लोग हैं. एंड उस बंदे ने मुझे कहा कि सुना है कि तुम्हारी सलमा हायक आई है, तो उसने तो तुम्हें उस कैटेगरी में डाले, तो यू हैव टू बी वेरी केयरफुल हियर. और तुम मुझे बहुत ही इनोसेंट लग रही हो, तो तुम्हें कोई मसला हो तो मुझे बताना. एंड लाइक एट दैट पॉइंट ना ज़मीन नीचे निकल गई. मैंने कहा कि मैं पाकिस्तान से भाग के आई हूँ और यही मुझे इस तरह की नॉनसेंस सुननी है कि लाइक एंड देन ऑल्सो आई वाज सो कंफ्यूज्ड. आई वाज लाइक सलमा हायक, मी लाइक आई डिडंट at that time, like I don't understand, like I, sometimes I'm like, ab to hame pata na, like we have these conversations around like representation and brown and stuff. Us zamane mein waqai, like if you're not white, they just put all of us in the same category. Brown to someone who's Mexican and someone who's Pakistani ek hi cheez. Because I kept on thinking, उस ज़माने में एक Desperado film निकली थी सलमा की, and she's like the sex siren, and I'm pretty like modest in the way that I present myself, especially in like business, and I was like, उसने मुझसे किस तरह compare कर लिया, मैं तो बिल्कुल भी वो vibes नहीं देती, but it was literally brown person type thing, right? So it wasn't great, right? And then so I was at that think tank and I worked there for like 8 months, and then I had an incident where I was like, had a job offer, and like this other guy, like जब final stages थे, उसने जब मैं निकल रही थी कमरे से, उसने हाथ थोड़ा कमर पे डाला, and I went into the lower. So I was like, I'm not taking this job. And then I was in such a big fix because I was applying for jobs and the economy was shit उस ज़माने में. Iraq war was full swing में, and like मैंने कहा, what am I doing with my life? मैं सब confused हुई थी. And then I applied for this job at this media non-profit that made radio programs. Now, on their website, they said that they were centrist, but I could clearly tell that ये थोड़े से neocon type बंदा है. पर मैंने कहा कोई बात नहीं, नई job मिल रही तो ये कर लेते हैं. Terrible experience because politically very problematic. Also, he had anger issues, so I quit that job. And then at that point, I quit the job, and my father was like, well, थोड़ा media खुल रहा है पाकिस्तान में. I know, like, maybe you don't want to come here, but, Geo is doing some cool things. उस ज़माने में Geo had 2 or 3 hours of news. बाकी एक ही channel होता था. So then I moved back to Pakistan, and then I got a job with Geo. And then that's kind of how I started. And then as soon as I moved, earthquake happened, and that was like baptism by fire because of the kind of reporting that you have to do in a natural disaster of that scale. You learn so much. And then, it was the military government tensions and elections. I covered 2 presidential elections, these whatever civilian elections we have supposedly in this country, wo wale parliamentary elections, and then you just learn so much. And I covered floods in 2009, 2010, and then SWAT operations. So journalistically, Pakistan was like on steroids 5 years. The urban bombing started also 2008, 2009. We'd be covering like an intifada attack in Lahore at the police academy, and then something else would happen in Karachi. And so you just learn so much that like within 5-6 years, I was like, I had just learned so much. And I applied for this fellowship in the US, and I also applied for like investigative journalism because you start to feel like, बहुत ज़्यादा breaking news हो रही है, बहुत ज़्यादा like, you start feeling it कि, but what's the big picture here? How are we helping society? How are we helping people make better informed decisions? Because that's the point of journalism, right? You tell stories so that everyone knows about each other. You know that what your experience isn't the only experience. People are experiencing this country differently, and then you come up with solutions to build better.
Yeah, आप accountability दे रहे हो ना, like a tool for accountability.
And then, so the way that it happened was I ended up going for this fellowship at Stanford that focused on entrepreneurship, journalism, and innovation. And then I came out of that year thinking that mainstream media में कोई hope नहीं है. Because they're just so stuck on breaking news and politics, and also they are going through their own trauma, which is what I realized when I was working with older journalists, because itni censorship or suppression हुई थी 80s में, कि they're just living out that trauma of wanting free speech but not realizing that there's something bigger that's happening here. And like this country is overly young, and we're not educating them enough. We're not giving them enough resources. We're not giving them the kind of freedoms they need to make more informed decisions at a family level. And I felt like media wasn't addressing it. So then that's how I kind of transitioned to digital media, essentially, yeah.
Very, very cool and very interesting journey.
Still a little traumatizing.
Yeah,
I'm sure
but
you
very
go through
traumatizing.
certain things, yeah.
Yeah.
हम सहर हबीब के साथ अपनी गुफ्तगू कंटिन्यू कर रहे हैं इन आवर नेक्स्ट वीक्स एपिसोड ऑन आउट ऑफ द बॉक्स. और अगर आपको हमारा पॉडकास्ट पसंद आ रहा है so please like, share and subscribe and follow us on our other social media platforms given in the description below.